Welcome into the 615 Sessions podcast on this Friday, December 27th. Lovely to have you guys in for this week's episode. Hope your holiday season was awesome. Mine was good. Bert's back from vacation. We're ready to get up and rolling because it's going to be a busy off season with a lot of difficult decisions to make. But the person tasked with making those decisions, or the person most tasked, most responsible for making those Titans offseason decisions, he's catching a little bit of heat. Probably the best case you've heard against Ran Carthon, or maybe I shouldn't say the best case, probably the most compelling case you've heard against the job that Ran Carthon has done in two seasons now, nearly, as the Titans general manager. This was an article about Bill Barnwell, or from Bill Barnwell, about coaching openings, but it ended up being more about Ran Carthon when you talked about the Titans job and where he ended up ranking them as potential job openings in 2025. Because at 3-12, we know this is the case. Those things are always going to be talked about. All job performance is being evaluated. And with everything going on with the Titans right now, it is fair to kind of peel back the layers on a variety of these things. Also, because it's, Jags week and this is the toilet bowl, and there's not a ton going on in Titans news beyond, are people going to get fired? Are they not going to be fired? How long are we going to have to wait for somebody to be fired? All these different things. Who's going to play quarterback next year? It's going to be a lot of time to pass. So since we have a little time today, a bunch of you submitted questions. I've got 6 of them that I'm going to answer today, and maybe we bring this back to the podcast because this was something we used to do and we've gotten away from it. But I'm always happy to take your guys' questions, so we will do that. Today, if you're streaming the podcast live with us, thank you for doing so. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Share it around. Text the link to a friend. Subscribe to the 615 Sessions podcast in your favorite podcast app, and we would be grateful for you. So we're going to take a look at Ran Carthon and the heat that he's catching from ESPN, one ESPN analyst who's dissecting and diagnosing the job that he's done as the Titans GM. So Bill Barnwell is the figure here that we are going to take a look at. And I did talk about his column on the radio show today, but that was within the context of the coaching. And so the title of this column is Ranking the NFL Head Coach Openings for the 2025 season, the Best and Worst Jobs. And he's got 9 teams here, only 2 of which definitively are going to be hiring new head coaches in the offseason. But there's a couple of off-the-wall ones, a couple of expected ones, and the Titans, with a first-year head coach, are in the mix. The way that he's got them stacked, and here are the teams as listed, and then we'll go through how he ranked them. Bears, Dolphins, which would be a surprise with Mike McDaniel, but there's always one surprise firing in the NFL. And we know Stephen Ross is desperate to win, and the Bills are going to waltz essentially they already have won the division at this point in time with 12 wins on the year, and the Dolphins scrambling to get back to 500 since Tua came back. So Bears, Dolphins, Giants, Jags, Jets, Patriots, another first-year head coach in Gerard Mayo. And frankly, I was surprised to see them on this list, given that Drake May has made progress, but the football team around Drake May has been really poor, and they haven't seen the dividends of his development taking place in the win column just yet. Then the Raiders, Saints, and Titans are all the teams listed as potential job openings. So the way that he's got them ranked is from worst to best. And the Titans are, shocking nobody, a bottom 4 job in this 9-team ranking. Saints, Jets, and Raiders are all, according to Bill Barnwell, worse jobs than the Titans, and he is the Titans' 6th out of these 9 teams that may potentially have head coaching openings. And he gives the pros, he gives the cons, and he talks about Brian Callahan's job here, but he really hones in on Ran Carthon and why the team is so bad, because the results this season, in his words, have been difficult to watch. I'm going to read directly from what he's saying about the state of the roster. The core of the most great teams is the players they select in the first 3 rounds of the draft. Owing to mistakes from John Robinson, who was fired in December 2022, and disappointing picks by Carthon, those core guys consist of 2 defensive linemen, 2018 second-rounder Harold Landry and 2019 first-rounder Jeffrey Simmons, both of whom are on second contracts. There's nobody left on the roster from the 2020 draft. The only person left from 2021 is Dylan Radins, who hasn't impressed at tackle or guard. The 2022 class, led by the disastrous decision to essentially trade wideout A.J. Brown for Treylon Burks, appears to have delivered one starter in Chigakonkwo, as Burks has dealt with injuries. And he lists NPF has given up 8.5 sacks amid benchings this season. He also mentions that Roger McCreary has fallen out of favor. That's not true. Roger's just been hurt. So that is a correction that I could make for Bill Barnwell. But the part in there about disappointing picks by Ran Carthon. Now, I don't know how many Titans fans you would ask or who would tell you, like, name the most disappointing pick by Ran Carthon since he's been Titans general manager. It's a pretty easy case to make, or a pretty easy name to pinpoint. Beyond quarterback Will Levis, I don't know how many Titans fans would look at Ran Carthon's drafts and call them disappointing. But in listening to the case that Bill Barnwell makes, I think there is something here worth digging into at this point, because there is some scrutiny that is deserved on why this team with better personnel is so much worse at this point in time. Ken Caniff says, why are J-Rob's mistakes, if you're live streaming the show, we've got the comment section going. Why are J-Rob's mistakes on Rand's plate? Well, the case being made by Barnwell is that the mistakes by John have been further compounded by Rand, which is an interesting way to look at this, because while they have picked some players who you feel pretty good about, there's not really a ton there that definitively you feel strongly were in the best interest of the Tennessee Titans as a franchise, and we're going to dive into this at this point. So what he says here is Carthon's drafts, unfortunately, haven't been much better than Robinson's, which, I think personally I would disagree with. John's last 3 drafts were disastrous. Rand's drafts have been better than that, but listen to the case that's being made here. Peter Skoronski, a first-rounder in 2023, hasn't been consistent as a pass blocker. True. 2024 first-rounder J.C. Latham leads the league in sacks, allowed 13. Some blame for those protection issues can be put on the quarterback, but that's 2023 second-rounder Will Levis, who appears to be finished with the organization after 20 starts. All of this is happening with legendary offensive line coach Bill Callahan running things up front, so it's difficult to pin the problems on the coaching. The only Carthon pick who looks like a solid starter is defensive tackle T'Vondre Sweat. On top of that, the Titans have been aggressive in adding veteran talent with mostly disappointing results. Calvin Ridley has one 100-yard game in his first season with the team and just turned 30. Cornerback Ladarius Sneed has sat out most of his debut in Tennessee because of injuries. Center Lloyd Cushenberry tore his Achilles in November and could be limited in 2025. Corner Cheeto Awuzie has played only 6 games this season and might not be the same player we saw before he tore his ACL with the Bengals in 2022. He also turns 30 before next season. Other mid-tier signings, such as linebacker Kenneth Murray, who's on IR, I add parenthetically, and, of course, Titans legend, offensive tackle Andre Dillard, have been disasters, with running back Tony Pollard and edge rusher Arden Key as pleasant exceptions. So he's saying that just because they're slightly better than how awful John has been, or John's last 3 drafts were, he's saying that Ran Carthon is still not doing a good enough job. And I kind of nitpick some of this, even though I understand the case that's being made here. They haven't been good enough. The players that have been acquired here have not been good enough. I would say, I feel he's saying that J.C. Latham is not going to work out. And I think that he's probably been a little harsh on Peter Skoronski, even though for the 11th overall pick, Peter's got to be better, right? Peter's got to be a really above average player. He's got to be Quentin Nelson, and he's not that. So with the 11th overall pick, I think that's fair to kind of scrutinize as well for the value that was spent on the 11th overall pick being a guard. Now, J.C. Latham, at this point in time, I feel the best about of any draft pick that Ran Carthon has made. Will Levis is fair to criticize. I think Tajay Spears is fair to criticize for a 3rd-round pick with a team with so many damn needs across the board here, where there are a variety of different players, and with Derrick Henry was still on the roster when you went out and paid Tony Pollard $8 million a year. I think it's fair to nitpick the Tajay Spears one too. Wiley, Colton Dow, meh. Jaquan Jackson obviously has not worked out. Jarvis Brownlee has been solid, but he's still a part of one of the league's worst scoring defenses, and a good portion of that is because he's a rookie. But Jarvis Brownlee is a bright spot on a really, really bad team. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's a league average starter, which I think is fair to criticize, even though I, for the most part, like what he brings to the table. The free agency stuff is tough. I mean, in retrospect, and we understood why they made all the moves that they made, and there's nothing he can do about Lloyd Cushenberry tearing his Achilles. That's one I'll give him a pass for. But Snead, high-risk proposition, didn't pan out, played hardly at all. Awuzie, guaranteed money, high-risk proposition, didn't pan out, has played in only 6 games. We'll see if he finishes the season strong. Calvin Ridley, man, for the money, without there being a true number 1 wide receiver on this roster, it's really hard for me to, in retrospect, feel good about the Calvin Ridley decision. That's a really, really tough contract to hand out when in real time you looked at it and said, oh, okay, well, that made sense. They weren't even trying to get Calvin Ridley, but they got him and they need wide receiver help. But it's been so bad here with Calvin Ridley as the one. And even as he is evened out, even as he has gotten better, it's still not good enough for the compensation. And I know Calvin Ridley hates when you bring up his contract. I get that. That's a point of pride. I do think for the most part, he earned that contract or a contract similar, right? For what he's been in the league, what he's been able to contribute, how he was able to rebound. And he's still on the verge of a 1,000-yard season with 2 games to go. And that matters. That means something. But it's not been good enough. You don't feel good about the proposition of Calvin Ridley as your wide receiver 1 because he's not that. He needs a complimentary piece. And the Titans haven't drafted a wide receiver before the 6th round in 2 off seasons under Ran Carthon. So there is a lot of shit to clean up from what John Robinson left. But are Ran Carthon's drafts good? Or are they just not as nuclear reactive as John Robinson's last 3 drafts were? Perspective here matters. And the Titans are in desperate need of superstar caliber talent to put this thing over the top. Ran Carthon has yet to acquire one. Tony Pollard and Nick Folk are the 2 best transactions that Ran Carthon has made. And now Nick Folk is not even available at this point in time. So James Roberts says Rand needs to have another solid draft. Right tackle is a major need. No, Ran Carthon needs to knock this shit out of the park. No more solid. This team, you are up against Burrow, Jackson, Mahomes, and Allen. And those 4 players are getting better. Solid isn't going to get shit done. You need to have a game-changing draft here. The thing that made the Titans as competitive as they were for as long a period as they were the fact that John had some solid drafts and then absolutely crushed 2019. Jeffrey Simmons, A.J. Brown, Nate Davis, Amani Hooker. I think the only one that didn't work out was the pass rusher from Georgia. David Long was also in that draft, by the way. David Long was acquired by this team off practice squad from the Lions, then waived because he didn't pass his physical, which is crazy to think about. It's a tough situation for Titans fans who got slightly excited about David Long coming back to this team, and then were within less than 24 hours told, that guy's not gonna be here at this point. Do not settle for solid. Okay, there is too much, I think, and I love you guys, but you do have a tendency to accept less than I think you deserve. You need to have higher standards here. And I appreciate that Ran Carthon has had solid drafts. It needs to be more than solid. It needs to be something that shows me that you are the right people to put this puzzle back together, because right now it's stopgap type of stuff. And maybe Peter Skoronski is going to be a good player. Maybe Tajay Spears is going to be a good player, even though you already signed a player to play significantly more snaps than Tajay Spears this year. I need to see evidence from both the coaching staff and the front office that they are the right people to get this job done. You're worse than you were last year with better players. That's on the coaching staff mostly. But it's also on the idea of how often do we see teams mega spend in the offseason and those mega contracts do the amount of heavy lifting that they need to do? Almost never do you see a team with the strategy that the Titans approach this offseason turn things around in a meaningful way. Now you have the opportunity with what is probably going to be a higher draft pick than the 7th overall pick that you had last year, and higher draft picks in every other round. As a result, in the rounds that you do have draft picks, there's still some missing pieces and parts from things like Will Levis, from things like L'Jarius Sneed, all these other decisions that were made. On aggregate, Tell me, are these good drafts? Are they good enough? Or are they just not disastrous the way that John Robinson's were? That is the standard that I think you have to look at here. And you have to decide. It's up to you. I can't make that decision for you. I'm telling you, if I was a Titans fan, I would not put up with this shit. I would have no interest in capitulating to, we'll rebuild. No, you're allowed to be better, even as you're rebuilding. And especially when you've done as much upselling as this organization did on all of these things when they made the changes that they made. It's not Ran Carthon's fault that he's a part of the new vision Titans that have fallen flat on their face, but he is a contributing factor here. The front office in general is a contributing factor here. And there's a lot of this stuff that absolutely looks terrible in retrospect, even as I think that he got both people, Callahan and Carthon, got a raw deal coming into this organization. And while I'm cognizant of that, and while I understand that, my perspective also is, well, tough shit, fix it. That's your job. Your job is to fix it. If you can't fix it, then they'll find somebody else that can, because you can find anybody to go 3-12. I mean, truly, I believe that you can find just about anybody to go 3-12, and you don't owe these particular people anything, even though there's a percentage of you that will make that excuse for them, and that's fine. That's your right. Like I said, that's your opinion. But my opinion, if I was a Titans fan, would be like, no, this isn't good enough. They need to kill this upcoming offseason in ways that we will not know the dividends of until it's probably too late. Because the clock already started on Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan. And at 3-12, that clock has only been sped up. Impatience is a thing in sports. And you can't put those things back in the box once they've been sprung loose. Impatience is not going anywhere. And the most impatient person of all is not the fan base. It's the owner. And that is the person who's ultimately going to have to make these decisions at the end of the day. That's where these things are at right now. Like I said, Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan got a raw deal. Also tough shit. Fix it. That's your job. I know that's tough, but that's what it is. So in the absence of that, you guys did send me a handful of questions that you wanted me to answer today. And some of you have asked for a Q&A type of situation on the podcast anyway. So I've got 6 questions that I picked out if you're interested in hearing me answer them. And you can always DM them to me on Instagram at Buck Rising if you want. So this one from Adam, the first one, I guess, would be a day in the life type of thing. Like from whenever you get up. By the way, actually, let's do this before I get into all this stuff, because they do play a game this week. They're at Jacksonville. It's the Toilet Bowl. You know all of these things. The injury report before we get into the Q&A portion of the podcast, and before I remind you who the podcast is presented by, ruled out today were Nick Folk, Dylan Radens, Otis Reese, and Colton Dow. Questionable are Bryce Oliver, Tony Pollard, Amani Hooker, and Tyler Boyd. So that's what your injury report looks like right now. Keep you updated with the latest. Obviously, we'll have the Lee Company countdown to kickoff on Sunday. I'll be in Jacksonville, but Kayla Anderson and Brad Hopkins will be back here in studio hosting this thing and getting you ready for the Toilet Bowl, baby. I will be on boots on the ground reporting from the Toilet Bowl, and we will have a great time talking about meaningless football for both of these teams, except hopefully, dear God, hopefully this is at least a compelling game, better than 10-6 without an offensive touchdown scored by the Titans and no points scored by the Jags for 3 quarters until they scored 10 and came into Nissan Stadium and won it. Quick reminder before we get to the Q&A that the podcast is made possible by Zen Sports. They've got the Big Game Sweepstakes College Edition going on right now. This time, instead of going to the big game for the pros, they're giving you a chance to go to the very first big game in the new college football tournament with a grand prize of $10,000 cash and 2 tickets to the biggest college football game of 2025. It doesn't get much better than this. So what are you waiting for? Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for a full list of rules and earn a $100 no-danger wager on your first bet. Zen Sports, where betting just got better. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. No danger first wager, limited to plus 500 odds to qualify. Terms and conditions do apply. Must be 21 plus and in the state of Tennessee to bet at Zen Sports. Okay, so with everything that's going on right now and a variety of you sending in questions, I did want to get to these questions that you guys already sent in ahead. of the podcast today. Cricket says you should report from the pool, Buck. No, there's nothing. That that pool in the Jacksonville Stadium has to be filled with venereal disease and God knows what else. So no, I will not be getting in the Jacksonville Stadium pool. There's not going to be anybody there, and it's going to be raining. Like, this is going to be the toilet bowl for all toilet bowls. Going to be a great time. So with everything that's going on right now, you guys submitted questions, and this is the first one. A day in the life type of thing, like from whenever you get up on Sunday till when you go to bed. What does a reporter, or what do you specifically do? Well, that's okay. So just Sundays. Let's just take that Sundays because the week would be too long. So on Sundays, I'm getting ready for the game. Kickoff normally at noon or 1 Eastern, depending on what time zone we're in. We had a 3 o'clock game this year, but that's not that important to you guys because it was still 1 o'clock on the West Coast in Los Angeles. What I do is I get up, I put together my outfit, I put on some music, I'm vibing, I'm getting ready for the League Company countdown to kickoff, which starts at 9 a.m. So I'll get to the stadium 5 hours before kick. I'll get my bearings, I'll get my stuff set up, I'll get down on the field. Then I do the League Company countdown to kickoff with Kayla, Brad, normally Blaine Bishop, but he's off this week. So we do that. I typically do that on the phone from the stadium. If it's a home game, we do that outside of Nissan Stadium at Gate 3 from 9 until 11 a.m. So different home versus road. Road games, though, you're running around. You're trying to talk to as many people. A lot of times there's agents on the sidelines that you're trying to catch up with. Hey, how's your guy doing? What are you guys thinking in the offseason? How's the family? All these different things. Small talk with a little bit of business worked in as well. Then there's a social media component of what I do. So where I'm taking videos, I'm sending them back to this group text that we have for A to Z, where all the people responsible for posting on social media post all the stuff that you guys see pregame. From my perspective, then we cover the game. So I'm sitting in the press box. I'm writing whatever I'm going to write for A to Z Sports.com. We're taking it in. We're bouncing ideas off of each other. Normally, I sit between Teron Davenport of ESPN and Paul Kaharski. And everybody else, there's a lot less of us on the road than there are at home, but still, you have the same vibe at home, just with a little less logistical hurdles, because you always got to figure out how to get to the stadium. Does the stadium have as clear an entryway to below deck where you need to be? Where's the post-game interview room? All the different logistical things that you're trying to figure out pre-game for post. So you do the game, you write what you're going to write, or at least I write what I'm going to write. I go down, I do the post-game press conference. We'll do Callahan first and the quarterback second. In between, sometimes the locker room opens up, and that's where we go after games to talk to people like Jeffrey Simmons. Quarterback's the only one brought to the podium, either home or away, and the rest of the guys you get in the locker room. So you do that, then I run out there, I do my Two Rivers Ford reel, send that back, they edit it, they post that, and then I go about putting together primetime in the radio show. So that's about a 12, depending on the day, depending on the locations, about a 12 to 16-hour day. It's a good time. Normally, not at 3 and 12. It's been an absolute, I won't say an absolute suffering. It still beats digging ditches, let me tell you that. But for the most part, it's felt more like a job this season, really in the last 3 seasons, than it has at any point before that. But, it's still a great time. You meet a lot of interesting people. You still travel and see. I've only got, I think, 5 stadiums that I haven't done left on my list of NFL stadiums. Haven't done Vegas, haven't done San Fran, haven't done Jerry World, and there's one that I'm missing. Maybe it's just 4. I'll go back and look at my list. Either way. So that is a day-to-day on game day in particular. Ronan Q says the chat is fun today. Patricia says, who asked this question? Just Adam set that in. So that's from Adam. Second question that we'll answer in the mailbag on the podcast. You've said many times that you are not a fan of the Titans. They are just the team that you cover. Are all reporters like that? Or are some actual fans of the team? Not necessarily the Titans, but around the NFL. Explain how you watch a Titans game as a reporter versus a fan. Well, for the most part, some people, there are some people like Nick Suss. I don't know if I'm betraying a confidence here, but Nick Suss works at the Tennessean. He is somebody who's from Georgia, but he grew up a Titans fan his entire career. Then he got the job. He was covering Mississippi sports for a while. He, by the way, for those of you who don't remember Nick Suss, he went viral in an interaction with Deion Sanders when he was at Jackson State because Nick Suss refused to call Deion Coach Prime in a press conference setting, and it became a whole thing. But either way, grew up a Titans fan. Now he's working the Titans beat for the Tennessean. And he's had to essentially remove himself from fandom. That's different than me, who I don't have an NFL team. Like, I've never cared about an NFL team. In fact, I'm leaning, I'll be honest with you, and this is going to piss a lot of you off. I'm not going to say that I root for the Ravens, but I root for Derrick Henry, who currently plays on the Ravens. And this is the first year that I have gotten to be a Derrick Henry fan because he no longer plays for the team that I cover. Always liked Derrick as a person. Always enjoyed the time that I spent covering. Certainly enjoyed covering the games with Derrick Henry on the Titans roster. But this is my first time that I've gotten to actually like root for Derrick Henry and get up out of my seat when he starts to break a long one. It's been electric. So I'm not going to say that I root for the Ravens, but I'm sure as hell rooting for Derrick Henry this year. And if the Ravens happen to win the Super Bowl, then that will make me happy on behalf of Derrick. That doesn't make me a Ravens fan. So I've always been, I've always not had to worry about it because I frankly don't care about who wins or loses, other than, I would like the team that I cover to be better than 3-12. That's pretty ass. It's been less than ideal. B-Birds on Twitch says you're just trying to get in Bert's good graces. Well, no, I just like Derrick Henry. Regina says, I don't know why Buck is on Titans radio because I'm really, really good and they pay me a lot of money to do it. And I like money. I'm a big fan of money, Regina. I don't have to do anything with your team, but I like that money. Love to see it. And it's fun to, regardless of what team it would be. Nashville just happens to be the place that I'm most comfortable. And I did a long-term deal in March to keep me here for the next 4 seasons because I love the city. The football team I would like to be better. I would like to talk more about other football teams if I'm dealing with a football team that's 3-12, but that's personal. You understood what you're signing up for, and the check cashes no matter what team you're covering. But it's better than living in Detroit or Jacksonville or God knows where else. There's not a lot of great NFL cities. Kansas City sucks. I would not want to live in Kansas City. So that's kind of where I'm at this point in time. Cricket says, I, for one, appreciate Buck's unbiased reporting. Yeah, I get it. Like, if you're a fan of the team, you want somebody who cares about your team as much as you do. I understand. And there are some people that are like that. There are some people that have covered the team that are actively Titans fans or not. I think there's way less that are actively Titans fans. I don't think there's anybody who's super, super blindly homerific about it. Even Jimmy, who takes a paycheck from the team at this point in time. Like, Jimmy will still criticize them when they are when they're bad. But that's because Jimmy is the best among us. He was the best journalist objectively when he was working for the Tennessean. And the reason that they hired him is to keep Jim Wyatt off their neck. And certainly a lot less stories get broken without Jimmy hunting them down at this point. John Halliday says why he's talking about Derrick Henry, why he is no longer a Titan, so I don't follow him. I stop rooting for players when they're gone. Well, that's fine. But for the rest of us who don't give a shit about what team these players play for and just like to watch fun players, like I'm a Justin Jefferson fan. Justin Jefferson played the Vikings this year. He's still excellent to watch. I'm a Jamar Chase fan. He's excellent. I'm a Joe Burrow fan. I'm a Josh Allen fan. Like, great football players you can root for without caring. And you can do it the other way. Like, obviously, if you have allegiance to one team, that's cool. That's what makes a fan base. But for the most part, I'm sure the majority of people like root for a team over a player. But I think there's more people who root for just straight up players anymore than there ever have been. And I personally enjoy rooting for players, seeing greatness, even if they're not the players that I cover on the team that I cover. Because DeAndre Hopkins was here, and that was cool. But now that he's not, there's not a lot of things that indicate greatness about the Tennessee Titans other than Nick Folk. And unfortunately, he's hurt this week. All right, another question that was sent in. Explain talking to players in the locker room. I've heard you say that Dennis Daly and others were never there for you guys to speak to after games, and some always were. How does a player leave the locker room without speaking to the media? And how do you ask questions to players following a win or a loss? Okay, so there's a couple of different questions in that question. This is taking a lot longer than I expected, but that's fine. We got time on a Friday. Let's take it in parts. How does a player leave the locker room without speaking to media? Well, easy. You can, if you're fast enough, you can shower, get changed, get dressed, and get the hell back on the team bus or get to your car as fast as humanly possible while the coach's press conference is still going on. And if the quarterback is quicker than you are as far as getting ready, well, then we're all sitting in the media room waiting for the quarterback to speak while the locker room's emptying out because they don't want to deal with us after another loss, especially for a team that's lost 12 games at this point in the season. So that's, you just get out faster. Now, some of they do have a PR staff that will keep some of the guys in there. Just be like, hey, just give me 5 extra minutes. We'll knock this out. It won't take much of your time, and then you can get on with your day. Because the PR, somebody has to be there in the postgame locker room for us to speak to. And sometimes Callahan will go, and then there will be a little time between the quarterback. Derrick Henry used to take an hour and a half to get ready to go after games, whether he's getting treatment or whether he's just, putting his shit on, because Derrick always had pretty extravagant outfits. So you would, you bob and weave. Sometimes you go do Callahan, then you dip into the locker room, then you come back for the quarterback or Derrick. When Derrick was still on the team, you just you have to play it by ear that way. But it's not too hard to get out of the locker room without having to talk to us. And then the question, how do you ask questions to players following a win or a loss? Well, it's easy. I mean, it's always about the game and the immediate post-game locker room. So it's always going to be about, okay, well, you threw an interception here. What were you seeing? Okay, you got a penalty here. What happened on the penalty? Okay, you won a cup. I mean, this team hasn't won back-to-back games since 2022, so this is a question I haven't asked in a while. But all right, you won back-to-back games. How can you continue that momentum moving forward? Or why is a divisional opponent more? Why is a divisional game more? Why do the records matter less than they do in any other game? Because it always seems to be the case, even as nonsensical as it might be. The Texans can lose to the Titans on any given week. The Jags can beat the Titans on any given week. No matter how bad these teams are, divisional games always matter. And obviously, you're keeping notes throughout the course of the game. So you've got individual performances. Tony Pollard, you broke 1,000 yards. How much does that mean in a season where you guys aren't obviously going to the playoffs, but you're still playing for pride? Calvin Ridley, those kind of things, statistical milestones. All those kind of things come up throughout the course of it at this point in time. Jonathan says, Chad is super salty tonight. Listen, if Patricia says I would have asked better questions than this, well, I'll ask a better question and maybe I'll answer it at DM at Buck Rising on Instagram. I'm just answering the questions that you guys sent me this time around. All right. Question number 4 of the 6 that we have available. Is a player required to talk to the media? Coach and quarterback are. There's no other players who are outright, like, contractually required. Well, they are required to talk during the week. That's different. Like, everybody is required to be available during the week to be approached. That's part of their contracts. It's how they get paid the kind of money that they do, because it's all tied up in the media deals, right? 5, that was an easy one. 5, one of the criticisms that a lot of Titans fans had of the media during the Vrabel era was that you never asked Mike hard questions. Mike famously was never afraid of showing his frustration or anger at you guys, but some of the questions that you asked, is there a way that you might phrase a question so Vrabel wouldn't cuss you out and walk away from the podium? I don't know. Sometimes you got to read the room. Like, nobody would have ever asked Mike Vrabel whether his team's toughness was in question, and that's a question that was unique to Brian Callahan. That question got asked. I thought there were plenty of tough questions about Todd Downing while Mike was here, about Greg Aukerman when Mike was here. It really just depends on who you're dealing with. Do you have a relationship with that person? Is it a good relationship? Is it a bad relationship? You don't ever tell them the questions are coming. You try to get it as organic as humanly possible. And sure, I'm sure some people work their way around Mike so as not to get, their head cut off at certain points. But for the most part, Mike would answer the questions. And even if he roughed you up on the front end, like, it wasn't ever bad. Brian Callahan is really, really good at dealing with the media. For the most part, he's had some, we'll call them first-year coach gaffes this year, and that's fine. Like, those things will happen. But he's just a very pleasant person to deal with, which, reportedly Vrabel wasn't. So they hire somebody who they got along with better. Now, whether that person ends up being a good coach or not remains to be seen. But that's, it just depends on the person, and it depends on the reporter, and it depends on the relationship. So I know that's kind of a non-answer, but that's what it is. Nolan Sanders on YouTube says, I can just imagine Vrabel's response to his team being soft. If you think Callie went off, Vrabel would be way worse. No, Mike would just leave. Like, Mike, the Callahan rant, I don't know. Like, I'm not going to kill him for sticking up for his team, but I thought it was a bit performative. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like when NPF was talking about how much he's focused on trying to get tougher and all these different things. I'm like, okay, but you say these things, but can you do it? Can you execute? Can you actually be a meaner, badder offensive lineman? And that show up other than you're trying to manifest these things into existence. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes you just have to. You just have to keep that mindset. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But I don't know, the Callahan soft thing. Like, I don't care. Go beat somebody. And then they lost to the Colts the way that they do, and none of it matters, because if you wanted to criticize a team for being soft, you would show them 335 rushing yards allowed in a game after they were called soft publicly, and you would say, well, go prove otherwise. And they didn't. So tough scene. All right, the last question. And you guys can, we can do this once a week if you want. You can always submit them. You can DM them to me on Instagram. You can DM them to me on Twitter. If you guys think you can ask better questions than this, you're welcome to do so. I'll answer them. But the last one, can a player or coach just up and leave a press conference if they want to, or do they have to be there for a certain amount of time? Yeah, they can get up and walk off. Mike's done it a million times. Players will say that's no more questions. A lot of times the PR is hovering over us or hovering behind us as we ask the questions. There to say last question, or 2 more questions or something like that before we get cut off. If it starts to get a little too spicy, that's happened with Calvin Ridley this year. That's happened with Will Levis after he got benched. So those are all things that are possible. But it's not a hostage situation. We're not holding a knife to Tony Pollard's back and saying, yes, you have to stay here for 5 more questions or else. That's not how that works. All right. It's fun Q&A. We haven't done one of those in a while. And you guys can submit those questions if you have them beyond what we might normally talk about on the podcast to @BuckRising on Twitter or Instagram. My DMs are open. That'll do it for us today. I'm off to Jacksonville tomorrow. Have a great rest of your weekend and tune in to 104.5 The Zone for the Lee Company Countdown to kick off then. See you guys.